promised I'd do this for a few people. I've been getting quizzed a fair bit about ZX blade retrieves. So let's get into it, and I'll try and do a quick, simple demo of what I do. I'm sure everyone else has their own form of area-specific retrieve that works for them on, all the fish that a ZX will catch, for their yellowfin bream, for their black bream in other states around Australia, etc. But this is what I do most of the time, so I'll generalise a little bit, but here we go. So, of course, you need a mini fishing rod for a mini demonstration. So I think my default selection is always a ZX40. It gets down quick, and that's the name of the game. So I can always drop back to a 35 or a 30 even if the bite demands it. Okay, so number one mistake people make is when they cast out onto the water surface, they close their bail arm, and this causes a sort of dragging, unnatural looking sink, sort of like when the wind gets on your line. We all know it's good to present with a straight line. So open your bail arm, your lure falls straight to the bottom, straight to where you're generally looking for the fish. Okay, so once we're there, the next thing people do wrong often is rod position. And the number one mistake is pointing your rod at your lure, sort of. It's not good. Angling, it's in the name. You want an angled rod, gives you better feel. You can measure the movement more accurately. Just much better feel. You can't feel much, and you tend to fish off the reel and not use your rod if you're pointing at the lure. I think the next mistake people make here is they think it's a big jigging style lure, which I'm sure it is at times, but what I'm doing most of the time is when the lure falls to the bottom, I'm always allowing a little bit of slack on the line. So I've got that little bit of slack there. You can always see if you've been hit on the drop, so you get that tick on your line and you notice the lift into the fish. So there's lots of good reasons. Okay, so then when I first go to move the lure, I might be moving my rod a lot, but I'm only hitting the lure and hopping it. So I'm moving the rod a lot with a slack line and only hitting it quickly at the end, which is causing a little hop. You think little means an inch or two. I'm sure it hops a foot off the bottom, but if you lift the rod on a tight line, that lure is lifting a meter or so off the bottom, and quite often away from the fish, and they've got to find it again, so there's no continuity there. And often with a ZX you're getting chased, bitten, chased and bitten, and it's sometimes the third, fourth, fifth, sixth bite that you'll finally get a proper hook up, especially when they've been a bit spooky like they were in the weekend at the start. And you can remedy that spookiness with a few little variations here. Okay, so the standard lift, like I said, is hitting it on a slack line and just hitting it and letting it fall back down, and maybe picking up a quarter of a turn with your reel handle. But when I see people doing whole winds or a couple of winds, that shows you how much you've moved the lure. It's not what you want to be doing. You want to be keeping that as a default as small as possible. There's always variation, on the day, as we know, but that's my default retrieve. So let's just have another closer look at that retrieve. You've cast out, you've let your bail arm open and had a vertical fall to the bottom, and the bent line with an angled rod, and we're going to hit that lure with a small hop and let it drop. Lure with a small hop and let it drop, and repeat. It's the first half of the tree where you'll get the bite normally. You may be wasting time if they're on the bite and you are catching fish, to fish it all the way back. That sort of more vertical part of the retrieve back here near the boat is not as effective. So it's definitely that first half of the retrieve that you want to concentrate on. That's a big way of adding in that efficiency to your day. So you spend more time in this section of the retrieve across the day will equal more fish. Times when the bite gets really tough, it can almost be just halve up that tap again and just tap it and leave it there. And sometimes in that sort of sweet spot in the retrieve that I find, which is, you know, generally a third to a halfway back in the retrieve, that's where you get a lot of your bites. So if it's tough, that's a good time for a super long pause. And I'm not so much one for shaking it on the bottom, but I'm definitely one for a tiny hop and just letting it sit. Just letting it sit, and there'll be a lot of times and you'll go to pick up and you're on, you know, the fish has come over and taken that lure during the pause. So that's your basic retrieve. I mean, it's actually really simple. The other things that you want to look for are, of course, positioning of the boat. Positioning the boat upwind, as you would with the majority of retrieves, and when you're throwing your line out, getting a straight line so you don't have any big bend in the line. It's always good, especially for deep water presentations with this, which is often is. A few other things to think about. Leader. So you don't really require a fine leader. Sometimes can almost be problematic to rerunning, you know, 3-4 pound leaders, especially if you're using a heavier version of the ZX. You get more of this sort of thing going on with a thicker leader. It'll sort of arc over and down to the lure rather than sinking between obstacles in the river, like, gotta love a prop. So here's our little brim snag, and like so many areas in Tasmania, if you're fishing with a fine leader perhaps and your lure falls behind a rock, your fluorocarbon leader will often wrap around the rock and then you're pulling underneath the rock and jamming. Okay, don't panic. Take the boat 180 degrees that way and pull your lure out. It'll often be quite hard to pull out from under a rock, but make sure you can get as far away on that side as practicable and give it a good tug and out it'll come. Okay, so that's one really good reason not to go too far with your leaders. You really don't need to. There'll be the occasional time when they're super spooky you might need to downgrade, but you're probably better off to go to a 35 on a 4 pound leader if you're having to finesse, but I just don't find you hardly ever need to. The other one, this is a really good tip, okay? This will save you a lot of ZXs or any deep vibe, but particularly this sort, okay? We've only got very small little assist hooks on here, okay? Sometimes I rig with the next size up the M size if there's big fish around. Just been trying that lately actually, and they work just as well. But the little ones pull out of timber really well. So you'll be retrieving, let's do it with the other hand so you can actually see something, and your lure will scrape over a snag and hook up on the assist there, and there's always a temptation to pull hard and try and get it off the snag. This will only sink the hooks in more, and if you pull hard in that direction you're going to break the lure off, lose a leader, lose your lure at best, okay? And there's absolutely no need to lose your lure here. Same thing, those little hooks are in the timber. You motor your boat 180 degrees that way, get firm on the line, and then that hook will twist around in the timber and sort of chew out a little section because it's only a small hook, and 98% of the time, roughly, it'll pop off the timber a little back. You know, fishing's all about efficiencies, and these little efficiencies give you a lot more casts. You know, you're not sitting there retying lures, you're not losing gear, you're not redoing leaders. All makes for a good day's fishing. And a tad more on leaders. So I, like a lot of people at the moment, are running the Amateur Chinook Harris leader. We just had the Victorian Bream Open, the first one happened over the weekend. Number 1 and number 2 placed anglers using this amazing leader. I know I've used a lot of leaders over my years in our stable at JML, and you know, I'm a gear freak. I love to try great lines, you know, from Sunline and all that. I'm a real fan of their stuff too. But it's nice to know you've got the best leader in Australia in your stable, and I really believe that when I say that. This stuff is incredibly durable. It's actually really well priced too. So you'll find a 50-metre spool of this in a couple of select places in Tasmania only. I can't seem to convince people to stock it, which is incredible. But anyway, you'll find it at Rod and Range and Williams Outdoors. It's will astound you, this stuff. I'm taken to polling in kilo fish on this stuff, which I shouldn't do, but I do. It's just so durable. And the other thing, of course, for dressing up your vibes is a little bit of scent. You know, at times I've gone from being a super scent fan to I don't think we need it sort of guy, but a lot of the time it's, you know, it's just a worthwhile upgrade to your rig, having a little bit of scent on there for those fussy biters. And just also a little tiny bit about vibe range and accessories. So, you know, showing you the ZX 40, also the 35. A couple of my favorite colors there. If you want to start and get some great colors, these are two of my favorites, 471 and 440, but I don't know many in the range that you won't have a lot of success on. I'm a UV fan, of course, particularly in these you know, colder times of the year where the fish are up in tannin water. I think that's a good bonus, a good improvement on your rig. And of course, it's well worth buying these. I'm not sure I've seen these stocked anywhere locally, and I can never work out why, because I need them all the time. Maybe because I'm fishing blades more often than a lot of people. Yeah, your ZX spare hooks. Now, the trick with replacing these is get your pair of braid scissors, leave the split ring on the lure that the other assists, the original assists were attached with, just trim off through the braid and remove all the material off them, and open that split ring and join it split ring to split ring. If you can work it out, it's best to pop your points up. Going split ring, these are rigged so that you can put them on that way, where the points will pop up, will sit up upwards. So if you're dragging across timber and rock, that's a good thing. It's the little things that count.